Let's get into it. Now, I want to start this video off slowly, carefully, because the topic I'm about to walk you through is not just about Chris Brown. It's about a system that fails to recognize harm when it happens to boys. On October 8, 2013, Olivia A. Cole wrote a piece that, if we honest, should have stopped the world in its tracks. The title was Chris Brown, A Nation of Raped Boys. I never forgot that article. The article unpacked something Chris said in an interview, that his first sexual experience happened at around 8 years old. With a teenage girl, he says she was about 14 or 15. But the thing is, when he told the story, he didn't sound afraid. He didn't sound violated. He sounded proud. Like this moment had given him power. Like it had trained him for the future. Like it made him a man. He said, at 8, being able to do it, it kind of preps you for the long run, so you could be a beast at it. Now I want you to really sit with that. What kind of world raises a boy to think that being exposed to that kind of experience means you're ready? What kind of world teaches an 8-year-old that what happened to him in that situation was a win? And furthermore, a win that makes him a man. Olivia's article didn't just focus on Chris. She talks about boyfriends, classmates, men in her life who all told similar stories. And I have personally heard similar stories. Boys who were 7 or 9 and believed that their early exposure made them stronger, not harmed, not taken advantage of, not protected, just ahead of the curve. And this is the lie that I want us to all name together. That early exposure equals power. That being wanted by someone older equals validation. That surviving something confusing and inappropriate means you're more of a man. Olivia wrote something that shook me. She said the same poisonous system that tells women that they are rapeable tells men that they are not. And I believe because of that, the behaviors we recognize as trauma in girls, we brazenly ignore in boys. My first job out of grad school was at CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and the National Center of HIV, STD, and TB Prevention. And I had a colleague, older white guy, he had a ponytail. And one of the things he was working on was sexual assault in young boys. And his theory was something, I might be botching it because that was in 2003, but his theory was something along the lines of there's not much vast difference in the amount of sexual assault happening to girls as happening to boys. His theory was that social constructions make it that boys are underreported. Now, I might have butchered that, but his whole point was that girls are sexually assaulted and so are boys at probably equal rates. A girl acts out, we ask questions. A boy acts out, we say boys will be boys. Depression, rage, shutdown, over-sexualization, hypersexualization. In girls, we treat those as signs. In boys, we call it personality. Now, last month, Chris Brown was in the news due to his long and complicated legal history. On May 15th, he was arrested and charged with inflicting grievous bodily harm in what prosecutors said was an unprovoked attack in a London nightclub. In this incident, he allegedly attacked a music producer with a tequila bottle at the Tate nightclub in London's Mayfair. He has since been freed on bail by a court in London on the condition that he pay 4 million British pounds immediately, with a further 1 million due in 7 days. His next court date is actually in 3 days, June 20th. Between his shows, that's a busy man. And he got to surrender his passport if he's not traveling or on tour, according to the judge who presided over his case. Other bail conditions include living at a specific address known to the court, not contacting the alleged victim, not visiting the Tate nightclub, and your boy cannot apply for international travel documents. Then Chris Brown went on Twitter after his Wednesday's bail hearing, and he tweeted, "From the cage to the stage. Sir, you might want to sit the hell down and be quiet." Anyway, now, I will admit, in preparing for this video, I was going to say at this point to look at this abbreviated timeline of his troubles, starting in 2009, his arrest for assaulting his then girlfriend, Rihanna, up through the date. That's what I was going to say right here in the video. But then I realized as I was scrolling through the timeline, just how many charges Chris Brown has had. So instead, I'm going to link the description to the Billboard article in this video. It's titled Chris Brown's Legal Problems, A Timeline of Trouble. It's a chronological timeline of Chris Brown's legal troubles from 2009 to the present. But I was absolutely, as I looked at it, not finna sit here and put all that up on the screen. No way. So I'll just link the article. Just know that it begins on February 8, 2009, where at 19 years old, Chris Brown punched, choked, and bit Rihanna, leaving her with visible facial injuries. I just saw the picture in my head. Not gonna put it on the screen, but most of us remember that picture. And she needed hospitalization. Chris Brown turned himself into the police and later pled guilty to 1 count of felony assault. And the timeline ends in 2024. A lawsuit was filed in Texas claiming that Chris Brown and several accomplices brutally and severely beat 4 men backstage at Dickies Arena in an unprovoked attack following one of his shows. The violence included Brown and his entourage surrounding the plaintiffs, throwing chairs at these people, repeatedly kicking, stomping, and beating them. Chris. And here's the thing. In my opinion, we add and we remove value to the charges people get, both in general and we do it by gender. We respect violent charges in men more. Had the same charges you gonna read about in that Billboard article been those of a woman, people would shudder. Damn, she a G. She ain't to be played with. Conversely, had Chris Brown's charges been consistently stuff like petty drug crimes, even property crimes like simple possession, our reactions would be vastly different. Why he keep getting caught? He needs to be better at using drugs. Don't get high off your own supply, Chris. At least sell and distribute. Why is he always charged with property crimes? Nigga, schedule more tour dates, because clearly you need the money. Would have been a range of the responses we would see. Violent crimes, men, it clicks. Violent crimes, women, we'd be like, God damn, I ain't fucking well. Petty crimes, men, especially men with money, we'd be like, what's the problem? Go on tour. Clearly you're broke. And guess what? FBI and the DOJ data supports my theory and our cultural biases. In the criminal justice system, men are arrested and convicted at significantly higher rates than women, especially for violent and property crimes. However, women's arrest rates have been increasing for violent and drug offenses. Now, I'm gonna also say that some of those violent and drug offenses are women as accomplices to their old man. I don't remember what the statistic was I heard, but the women's Angola, it was definitely over 80% of women charged with violent and property crimes were accomplices, driving a getaway car, stashing the drugs. So yet and still, we value violence among men way more. Additionally, women are also more likely to be incarcerated for drug and property offenses than men. That makes sense. But my overarching question that drives this video, what if the boys are carrying trauma too? What if they are survivors, just never given permission to name it? What if we stop treating men who are violated as some sort of gift? What if being unprotected was not treated as a promotion into manhood? That's what this video is about. Not to relitigate Chris Brown's past, but to look at the cultural silence that shaped him and the silence shaping so many other boys right now. Let's talk about how harm gets renamed, how power gets assigned to the very moment someone was failed, and what that does to a generation of men who were never supposed to be vulnerable in the first place. Before we do, I want to center this entire conversation around one quote by Danielle Rped. No one enters violence the first time by committing it. That is the quote this entire conversation will center. Now, you might think that after hearing all that, I'm gonna say cancel Chris Brown. But this video is not about canceling Chris Brown. It's about telling the truth that lives underneath his story. Because when he said in the interview that he had his first sexual experience at 8 years old with a girl who was 14 or 15, most people barely blinked. He said it so casually. It kind of preps you for the long run, he said. So you could be a beast at it. But nope, this is not about canceling anybody or anything except canceling rape culture itself. This video is for the ones who carry big truths in small spaces, the leaders, the quiet architects, the ones who overthink how to say what needs to be said. If you the type who notices what's not being named, this video is free. Like I said earlier, in 2013, writer Olivia A. Cole published a piece titled Chris Brown, A Nation of Rape Boys. It is still up. I believe it's a WordPress. She wasn't just talking about one boy. She was talking about a system that teaches girls that they can be harmed, and that same system teaches boys that they cannot be. But before I move on, we have to define what is a system. According to Business Dictionary, a system is a set of detailed methods, procedures, and routines created to carry out a specific activity, perform a duty, or solve a problem. A system is a group of things that work interdependently, meaning they're connected and need each other to operate, but they are not the same thing. What you talking about, Willis? I'm talking about the digestive system, for example. Think about your digestive system. Every part has a role, but what is the purpose of the digestive system? And why is the answer to digest food? The stomach doesn't function like the liver, but they work together to digest food. You could remove your gallbladder and still survive, but your body will not function the same. It's all connected, interdependent. That's a system. Now, a system is a couple of things. It is organized, like the digestive system. It is ordered, so the food enters the mouth, down the esophagus. The esophagus is not above the mouth. It's organized and it's ordered and it's purposeful. Again, the purpose of the digestive system is to digest food. Systems also consist of interrelated and interdependent elements, components, digestive, esophagus, mouth, large intestine, small intestine, colon, entities, factors, members, parts. These elements continually influence one another directly or indirectly to maintain their activity in the existence of the system in order to achieve the goal of the system. Digestion. It got inputs, it got outputs, feedback, mechanisms. If you stuck around with my past couple of videos, I talk about feedback, inputs, outputs, loops. All of this is done to maintain an internal steady state. You might remember from science class that's called homeostasis. Despite a changing external environment, the digestive system is working very hard to maintain homeostasis inside, despite all the ruckus going on outside of your body and inside your body, but outside of the digestive system. Systems also have boundaries that are usually defined by the system observer. Stick around for that last one, because when we start talking about social systems like racism and classism, the system observer is going to come into play. Another system is a car. It's a mechanical system, to be specific. The engine, the brakes, the fuel line, the tires, each part is different. But remove one crucial element in a car, the whole car stops. Or worse, it might still move, but now it's unsafe. And I specify crucial because that's how systems work. In order for a system to be stopped, you must remove crucial elements. Like a car could drive without air conditioning. Because my mama been driving in Atlanta, Georgia without air conditioning for at least 5 years. And she refuses to get a new vehicle, although she can afford one. Technically, a car can drive without a door. Some of us may have grown up in them situations, especially them situations where the left door was different from the right door and your mama had 2 sets of keys. Childhood poverty trauma, child. Crucial elements must be removed for the whole system to stop. So basically, the air conditioning and the heat in cars is not a crucial element that will cause a car to stop. But when that transmission start acting up, that transmission is a crucial element. That engine, crucial element. That's what makes a system deceptively durable. It doesn't need all parts to function, just enough to look like it's still working. A system is not just a collection of things. It's a group of parts that interact, reinforce, and maintain each other. Again, it has inputs, outputs, feedback loops. You change one part, you affect the whole system. You change one part, you affect the whole. But removing a single piece, the system might still survive because of how interlinked everything is. Now, one of the most overlooked systems that most of us engage every day is the system of family. And if we're gonna talk about systems, especially where we go in this conversation, we cannot skip the family. Because the family itself is a full-fledged functional operating system. And it's one of the first we ever experienced. Like all systems we talked about, it has interrelated parts. The parent who knows what's going on, but stays silent. The uncle who cannot be left alone with the kids. The sibling who learns to keep secrets. The cousin who jokes about it. And the auntie who believes, but says, we don't ruin family over things like this. And the auntie who believes, but she says, oh, we don't ruin family over things like this. What's done in this house stays in this house. Everybody plays a role. Everyone adjusts to keep the system from breaking, even if it means breaking a child. So what keeps the family system running? One is denial as a stabilizer. The uncle or the aunt who is a predator, oh, they didn't mean it like that. Or when we call girls fast, she just fast. She just hot in the drawers. She just had to try. Or it's not as bad as she making it out to be. Long story short, my neighbor, she moved, praise God, at the top of me. But she used to beat her kids, full-fledged. And it dropped once I knocked on her door loudly like a po-po and had a full-fledged conversation. And one of the things she said was, because her son, she had 2 sons, and their bedroom connected to my front office, which is a bedroom. And I could hear everything through the vent. And as somebody who didn't even get whippings growing up, physical violence is a no-go for me. It literally makes my skin crawl. So I would hear her. And so one day I just stormed down my steps and bam, 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 bam on the door. And in the conversation, well, she opened the door by saying, yeah, I'm beating his ass. Like, I know, I can hear you. And that's why I'm here. And in the course of conversation, speaking of, it's not as bad as she's making it out to be. One of the things she said was, he screamed extra loud just to get attention. He do that just to get attention. Ma'am, you're beating your child's ass. And you're gonna look me in my face and say that he's screaming extra loud just to get attention? No, he wants you off his ass. Now, over the years, they grew up, the boys grew up, so the beatings kind of stopped because that is a power dynamic when a parent thinks that she is far bigger than her child, but the moment that child have a growth spurt, it calmed down. Another thing that keeps the family system running is silence as protection. We don't talk about that outside this house. What happens in this house stays in. You're gonna mess up his life by talking about that. What will the neighbors say? Another thing is loyalty as currency. Oh my God. The child is told to protect the abuser to keep the peace, and harm becomes a secret transaction. Loyal to the abuser as currency for being part of this family. And like all systems, even if the abuser leaves, the system remains. Because it wasn't just about one person. It was about the roles that people play inside of the system called family. The silence, the coping mechanisms. That's why healing isn't just about confrontation. It's about completely restructuring the system. Systems stop functioning when an element is removed or changed significantly. Together, they allow understanding and interpretation of the universe as a metasystem of interlinked wholes. Systems organize our whole thoughts about the world. We're not thinking about systems unless you're a systems thinker. But the average person is not thinking about systems on a daily basis, let alone how systems organize our thoughts about the world. Now, AOC had something to say about Trump during his first administration. He can stay or he can go. He can be impeached or voted out in 2020. But removing Trump will not remove the infrastructure of an entire party that embraced him, the dark money that funded him, the online radicalization that drummed his army, nor the racism he amplified and reanimated. Now, AOC, I don't know if you would still, I'm sure you would still say that, but that motherfucker need to get out of office. IJS. I think Trump should have went back to back in his terms. Because that 4-year gap between that first administration, Biden, and that second administration gave the GOP way too much time to organize. He should have went back to back, I'm just saying. But systems are systems because we cannot completely dismantle them by removing one component. And as egregious as this administration currently is, the truth remains. He can stay or he can go. He can get impeached or he can get voted out, because they coming up, they starting to see Kamala might have really won this. But it is still true that as egregious as things are, removing Trump will not remove the infrastructure of an entire party that embraced him, nor the dark money that funds him, nor the racism that amplifies and reanimates him. That is still true because this is still a system. Now, when we talk about systems, we're not talking about just people. We talk about the infrastructure, the patterns, the reinforcement, the machinery, the thing that keeps running even when a single part is removed. And that's what makes a system dangerous. It's resilient and harder to dismantle than we think. Systems are designed to withstand change. And one of the most insidious things about systems is that we need their dysfunction to survive. We as individuals need the toxicity of systems to survive. Today or tomorrow, let's take the school to prison pipeline. Today or tomorrow, the justice system is actually dismantled and made equitable. How many people are gonna lose their job? How many COs gonna lose their job? How many attorneys are gonna lose their job? How many wardens? They can lose their job. Those can too. But when we say prison abolition, we also have to consider that especially towns that are funded by the one university and the prison in that town, you are going to unemploy 80% of a town by shutting down one prison. Systems, we need their dysfunction in order to survive. What happens if we make public schools equitable, make prisons equitable? What happens to all the social service workers? What happens to the physical therapy, the occupational therapy, the social workers? What happens to all of them? Where they getting a paycheck from? Most people are employed because of inequities in the system. We fix the justice system. What happens to the attorneys? And we wouldn't live in a world where we always need attorneys if we fixed justice. If we fix the beauty industry, what happens to all the people that are employed to make us feel that we're not fire, that we're not amazing? What happens? I'm not saying everybody gonna be unemployed, but if we really started making or challenging the beauty industry and started challenging our own perceptions of ourselves, the demand drops, the supply drops, and now you start messing with people's paycheck, because most of us are employed in spaces to uphold the inequities in the system. Very few people have jobs that are outside of supporting inequities inside systems. Very few people. Now back to this Olivia Cole article about Chris Brown and the Nation boys. She wasn't just talking about one boy. She was talking about, again, a system and a culture. A system that teaches girls that they can be harmed and teaches boys that they cannot. So what teaches these girls that they can be harmed? Well, at the bottom of it, which is supporting most of it, because before we ever get to the rape or the sexual assault, there's so much underneath the iceberg that we are not seeing. Again, only 10% of the iceberg is visible. So when we're talking about one single rape, you can guarantee yourself that there is 90% underneath that you didn't see. And some of that is rape jokes, catcalling, sexist attitudes, unwanted groping, sending unsolicited dick pics, unconsensual photos and videos. And then we rise up further into the iceberg, closer to the surface, and we start seeing victim blaming and shaming, contraceptive sabotage. We start seeing things like revenge porn. And it is not until we understand the tolerance of the behaviors at the bottom supports the excuses higher up, which is why when you actually get to the actual assault itself, people are saying things like, why you waited so long to file that lawsuit? Well, the criminal justice system mixed with our cultural systems are not very favorable for people filing sexual assault claims 2 seconds after it happens, because that's underneath the iceberg. Now let's land this systems plane. Let's land the plane. And let's talk about rape culture as a system. This is not just about bad men or individual actions. This is a system, one where boys are told fuck early and fuck often, where girls are quick to be called fast instead of structurally unprotected, culturally unprotected, or instead of actively protecting girls. And victims are asked shit like, what were you wearing? Instead of, who failed to protect you? And if you out here already in your mind talk about I blame the parents, please be quiet. Please be quiet. And in schools, we have teachers that actually laugh at coercion when it's done by a woman. Although we are seeing a growing number of women teachers being busted having sex with underage students. Rape culture, again, you know it's a chair because somebody told you it's a chair. You didn't make up that it was a chair. You were born into a world already calling it a chair. Rape culture is maintained by media, music, parents, coaches, church, silence, applause, toxic ass ideologies, and jokes that never get interrupted. We were born into this shit. We inherited this shit. You didn't just pop up one day and masterfully know rape culture. You were doused into it out of your mama's womb. Rape culture as a system has inputs, which is what we teach. It has outputs, which is how people behave, and it has feedback loops that say the more harm is misnamed, the more normalized it's going to become. Like the digestive system, rape culture digests people, eats them up and spits them out. Like the car as a system, it moves until something crashes. And the family system is typically where it all begins. Now remember, when Olivia Cole said in that article, it's a system that teaches girls they can be harmed and teaches boys that they cannot. What exactly teaches boys that they cannot be harmed inside of this system called rape culture? For one, rape culture teaches boys that they can't be harmed by redefining harm as a reward. That's the first thing it does. And by removing the language, the context, and a permission to name violation as something that they are allowed to experience. Let's talk about how that unfolds. First, rape culture violation as victory. Instead of calling it harm, the culture calls it getting lucky, becoming a man, getting experience, being irresistible, fucking early. And the impact of that is the boy who was exploited, he is now praised instead of protected. He is told that what happens to him is aspirational. This ensures that he never sees himself as a victim, only as a winner. But how about this? No one wins in these oppression Olympic games. No one. You're not a winner because you shouldn't be playing a game. Rape culture also unfolds with erasure through language. There is absolutely no mainstream script for boys being violated. There is absolutely no mainstream script for boys being violated. Full stop. We have no everyday term, for example, for a woman or older girl that's coercing a boy. Raped and molested are terms that are coded as something that happens to girls by men. And when it happens to a boy, it's rarely named because there's no normalized language or emotional permission to name it. And when I say erasure through language, another unrelated to rape culture example is we have no term for a mother or father who have buried a child. We got widow for a spouse who buried a spouse. We got orphan for a child with no parent, but we have no mainstream term for a parent who buries a child. That's another example of having just the absence of a script. No everyday term for a woman or older girl coercing a boy. Well, even when we think of the term predator, what comes to mind is typically not a woman. And rape and molestation are coded as something that happens to girls by men. I have multiple friends who have been sexually violated. They're women, and their predator or their violator was another woman. We don't really call those people predators. We wouldn't necessarily say quickly that that person was raped or molested, because rape and molestation are coded as something that happens to girls by men or women by men, not women by women. And when the age dynamic happens, we definitely not really calling the babysitter who raped the child they were supposed to be watching as a rapist, not the woman babysitter. There are multiple places where we have no scripts in society, multiple places. That's just one. And so the impact of that, when you don't have a language for it, there's often no reality for it. So even boys who feel shame, confusion, or trauma will not connect those emotions to harm. Instead, they get on microphones and rap about it like they should be bragging about it. We're going to get to that. Another thing it does is harm requires powerlessness, and boys are denied that. Rape culture defines masculinity already as dominance. So if you a boy and something happened to you and you didn't stop it and you felt confused or shamed, you have failed the gender performance test. You have failed the gender performance test because harm requires powerlessness, and boys are denied access to being powerless. So I'm going to say that again. Rape culture defines masculinity already as dominance. So if you a boy and something happened to you and you didn't stop it and you felt confused and shame around it, you have failed the gender performance test as a man or a boy. And the impact of that is admitting harm means admitting powerlessness inherently. And boys are not socially allowed to do that. So many reframe their experiences as agency, as bravado, even when it wasn't. We also have no sympathy and no safety net. So when a girl discloses abuse, flawed as the system is, there's often at least a public sympathy script, as botched as it might be. But when boys disclose, maybe they laughed at, they not believed, or they're told they should be grateful. When you don't have a script, when you don't have language for something, you get swallowed up. And the impact of that is disclosing harm as a boy doesn't yield safety, it yields isolation. So even when they do recognize it, the cultural feedback says that to yourself. Then there's sexual access as masculine currency. Boys are taught that their worth is directly tied to sexual access. The more they have it, especially early, the more valuable they are. So when abuse occurs, it's not framed as harm that needs to be healed. It's framed as proof of manhood, maturity, or even magnetism. So the impact is that rape culture doesn't have to deny boys are being harmed. It simply tells them that harm is what winning looks like, but no one wins in these oppression Olympic games. So the summary for all that, the absence of the script, the presence of a botched script, is the same system that tells girls their no won't be heard, tells boys that they don't even need one. Now, in this article by Olivia Cole, she tells a story of men she knew personally, boyfriends, friends who lost their virginity at 7, 8, and 9 years old. Let me be clear. I already got issues with the term losing your virginity. I'm not going there right now. But when you 7, 8, and 9, and it's likely that the person was 15, 16, you didn't lose your virginity. That was non-consensual, and you are a survivor of sexual assault. Full stop. But instead of recognizing those moments as violations, they framed them as badges of honor, proof that they were chosen, wanted, powerful. Because in a system that doesn't recognize boys as victims, early exposure to sex is not treated like harm. It's reframed as manhood. And what Olivia Cole writes, what we must sit with is this. The same poisonous system that tells women that they are rapeable tells men that they are not. So we actually do see the same signs of trauma that we recognize in girls. The rage, the shutdown, the promiscuity, emotional numbness. But we call it normal male behavior. But what if those boys were survivors, just never given permission to say so? The fact of the matter is that we are culturally trained, explicitly and implicitly, to recognize signs that a girl may have been harmed. We have that sudden silence. A girl who was once talkative and vibrant, all of a sudden she becomes silent and sullen because the bottom line is that sexual violence robs us of our voice. A girl who becomes loud but in combative and quick-tempered ways, very hot-tempered, short-tempered, irritable. And then we have sudden maturity in how a girl carries herself. Typically, she is misnamed in Black culture as being grown, but not because she wants to be grown, it's because she had to be grown. You hear it in how she talks. You see it in how she scans the room. She begins to dress carefully, but not for expression, for defense. She anticipates the adults' moods around her like it's a survival skill. She asks questions like a woman that is twice her age. One of the telltale signs is that she no longer plays like an innocent child, or if she does, it's performative, like a skit. And she no longer cries freely, like a child of innocence just cries because they're hurt. She only cries behind closed doors, if at all. She becomes a vault. She carries secrets like armor. She is overly analytical of what she says. And she begins to keep her back to the wall in new places. And that is something that innocence doesn't even worry about. Keeping your back to the wall, innocence be playing and ripping and running all over. But this girl begins to keep her back to the wall in new places. And innocence doesn't think about that. And she speaks like she's already been dismissed. So she is preempting being dismissed before when it actually matters. She's now measured and sharp and defensive. And she sounds like somebody who's learned to explain themselves before even being questioned. She's becoming a rehearsed voice of credibility, and she's barely 15 years old. These are not signs of wise beyond their years children, although they're often given that honor. These are symptoms of a girl who wasn't allowed to be a child. And she begins to fear softness. Affection begins to make her flinch. Compliments begin to confuse her. She starts to read every gaze as a threat, and she's usually not wrong. Because what's interesting about Black girls is between the ages of around 12 and 17, 16, Black girls have some of the highest rates of self-esteem amongst all girls across all ages. So when a Black girl goes from being confident, knowing she cute, feeling like she cute, we have a Black girl culture where we, instead of saying your hair is cute, we say yes hair, yes shirt. And so when a Black girl goes from being a confident teenager into compliments confusing her and reading every gaze as a threat, she's usually not wrong. It is a telltale sign that she may be a raped girl. Then we got hypersexual presentation, but it's coupled with disembodied behavior. So you'll notice she'll perform desire, but she doesn't feel safe in it. Like it's a costume, a defense, a way to take control before control is taken from her again. And the desire can go beyond sexual. This could be about everyday wants. Like she might be defensive when making a simple choice like which bag of potato chips she wants from the grocery store. She's invested in arguing about these potato chips, but she's disembodied from them, almost as if she doesn't really care about the potato chips. She's just committed to arguing. Hypersexual presentation, but disembodied behavior. Now, this is one where we gotta stop being called fast at a young age. We gotta stop calling Black girls fast. Not because she was fast, because what is fast? Replace the word fast with unprotected and it's a whole new meaning. But it's not because she was fast, it's because somebody already taught her things that her peers don't know. Because an adult somewhere let her see too much or touch too soon. And we got one that a lot of us recognize: seeking validation from unsafe places. Older boys, grown men, grown women, social media, the wrong crowds. Not because she don't know better, but because the people who should have affirmed her did not. And then the people who should not affirm her do. And then we got being punished more than being protected. So things like school suspensions. If a child goes from getting good grades, relatively good grades, to all of a sudden getting suspended in school, then the family becomes silent, and then public shaming begins to happen, that girl may be a raped girl. When a girl acts out after being harmed, people often respond with control and not care, because she then becomes the inconvenient girl when she was once the easy girl. And we want little Black girls to be the easy girls to get along with, and to the easy girls to raise, and the girls that don't cause ruckus. And when you start getting suspensions and detentions, you then become the difficult girl. We need you to go back to being the easy girl. So instead of caring for you when we see a difference in how you are showing up in school, we begin to become silent or shame you or respond with control, like more punishment instead of care. And then we got conflicted relationship with her own desirability. She might feel both powerful and ashamed, both in control and objectified. Like she doesn't know where she ends and the male or the female gaze begins. And for those of you out there saying she don't need to be worried about no gays, take a human sexuality class, please. Because we're talking about teenagers here, or preteens, who are wrought with hormones, who are discovering their desire, who are discovering their sexuality. So yes, she does need to be worried about a gaze. And if she doesn't know where she ends and the male or the female gaze begins, she's going to have a conflicted relationship with her own desirability. And the last thing a preteen or a teenager needs to be left to deal with on their own is desirability. Left to their own devices, just them and their friends with their frontal lobes wide the hell open. Nobody have a closed frontal lobe or mature brain yet, just left to their own devices trying to figure out their own desirability. They need community, not shame. Got hypervigilance and people pleasing. And I know I ain't the only one in this theory, but this is the age where people pleasing probably begins. And this is the age where you see the grown up who's hypervigilant and the grown up who's a people pleaser. She began right here as a teenager, just like I'm going to get off topic real quick. Just like I believe when we meet those 65 and 70 and 75-year-old old women, you can meet one old woman that you want around. Miss Margaret, she is super cool. We love Miss Margaret. She's a delight to be around. She's somebody, auntie or grandma, or maybe she's a coworker. And then we might have Miss Mildred. Miss Mildred is a bitch. Similarly to how the hypervigilant and people pleaser that we meet in our 40s began as a teenager, that's the same way Miss Margaret and Miss Mildred began right now in their 40s. I firmly believe that the bitch old people and the delightful old people began in their 40s. So if you in your 40s, look around and decide who you about to be. Are you about to be Miss Margaret or are you about to be Miss Mildred? Are you about to be the 70-year-old that the young people like around, that they like as their co-workers, that they like going to lunch with? Or are you about to be Miss Mildred, the one that they talk shit about, the one that feel like you never eat lunch at work. Meanwhile, you eat lunch at work every day with the people that you fuck with. I just don't fuck with you, Miss Mildred. Miss Mildred and Miss Margaret are forming right now in our peer groups in our 40s. So we get to decide right now, peers, who we gonna be? Mr. Tyrone or Mr. Leroy? Miss Margaret or Miss Mildred? Similarly, I'm gonna get back on topic. Hypervigilance and people pleasing. When we meet adults who are hypervigilant people pleasers, those adults were formed as teenagers, always reading the room, left to manage everybody's comfort, making themselves smaller as teenagers or louder as teenagers or perfect as teenagers, anything to stay safe. But the thing with this one is that it's often affirmed because, again, we like black girls who play small and stay quiet. We like black girls who are people pleasers because one of the most famous quotes in black communities is be seen and not heard. Why can't you be easier like your brother? Meanwhile, your brother is also being sexually assaulted and his voice gone. Adults you meet in life were formed as teenagers and young people. Everybody you see out there that is maybe addicted, maybe the notorious person who is always randomly directing traffic, but they're not employed by any type of city government, and you could tell they own something, or the random person that is in your neighborhood that you know is on that shit, that person was once a teenager and once a child. They didn't like pop up as adults. They have a navel. That person was formed as a child, as a teenager, in the age range we talking about, nation of raped boys and girls. Now, we are more trained in identifying those traits in girls, but we are hardly trained at all to recognize what it looks like when a boy has been exposed to sexual harm, especially when that harm is misnamed as a blessing or almost like a rite of passage or conquest. When you conflate the symptoms of harm with what manhood looks like, you're gonna miss raped boys every time. When you conflate the symptoms of harm with what it looks like to be a man, you're gonna miss harm every time in boys. Now, here's how we might begin to spot an unprotected boy whose early exposure to adult experiences have been mislabeled as you bagged a baddie or maturity or how the fuck you get. Let's talk about how to spot a raped boy. Unspoken signs of boys who were exposed way too early and mislabeled as a man. No men are 12 years old. We gotta stop calling these little boys the man of the house, first of all, even if the father is not in the picture. The way we call little boys, oh, you the man of the house now, especially if their father was killed or died or divorced. Oh, you know, you got to be the man of the house now. No, he's not. He's 12. He's still a little boy. And so you just exposed him too early and mislabeled him as a man. So signs of a mislabeled little boy. The main one is promiscuity framed as pride. A young boy who brags about being chosen by older girls or women. A young boy who brags about smashing his babysitter while hiding discomfort, confusion, or detachment underneath. That is so odd. because it's frequently overlooked, because it's conflated with what it looks like to be a man. Boys often brag about smashing their babysitter, but seldom does anybody say, sir, you are a survivor of sexual assault. Full stop. Insert Wayne, Tyler the Creator, Kevin Gates, Kanye West, Bizarre of D12, and the most infamous one, y'all probably know what I'm gonna say, Boosie. All of y'all step to the front of the line. And we're going to get to all of y'all in a second. Then another telltale sign of a raped boy is hyper-performance of masculinity. So overcompensation with aggression and control, or like that beast energy trying to prove your manhood. Because the original act that made you a man was not safe. But you can't say that out loud. The third one is an inability to set sexual boundaries. My God, if that ain't men on average. So the confusion between desire and obligation. Manhood says you always supposed to want it. So men often say yes before even checking in with themselves. I am convinced that patriarchy has men out here just screwing mindlessly, not even aware that sometimes you actually not attracted to that person and don't want to have sex. But patriarchy got you out here confused between desire and obligation. So that means a lot of your sex was not out of desire, but out of patriarchal sponsored obligation. Then the fourth one we have is detachment from emotional intimacy. Many men can do sex, but connection, vulnerability, trust, yeah, maybe. That's harder because the first lessons about touch were not safe. So then you have to become disembodied, make yourself an object, so you begin to do sex, the act, because you don't get to check in with yourself about whether you want it or not. But the emotional attachment to sex is non-existent. So you have sexual partners who feel like you're fucking on them, not making love or having sex with them. Then we got rage that is untraceable. Motherfuckers just full of rage. And we can't trace the rage to shit. They angry at women, they angry at authority, they angry at the man, they angry at the world. But underneath that rage is grief. The body remembers even when the mind represses. Then we got over-sexualization in youth that is celebrated instead of questioned. We got a lot of over-sexualized young people. And I need it to stop with adults calling little boys a ladies' man. He's 5. Just because he has beautiful eyelashes and curly hair, why are you looking at a 5-year-old to even string together the two words ladies' man? Calling him heartbreakers. Oh, he gonna be a little heartbreaker when he grow up. Ma'am, he's 6. Why are you remotely seeing him in that light? That reminds me, for some reason, when we tell little girls to go change into something else because such and such is coming over to the house, instead of asking ourselves, why am I making somebody put on something else? Why am I letting somebody come over here that my child got to change clothes for? Similarly to little boys, why are we not asking, why does he know this much about sex? Who taught him this? And this is beyond, oh, my sexual organs just happen to feel good when my pants rub up against them, or, oh, I'm starting to feel little things in my little wiener. No. Some of these young people in single digits are way too advanced in what they be saying sexually, even if they just spouting it. Why do you know that? Who taught you this? And then we got silence around early sexual history, or worse, loud ass storytelling that masks pain. It's not that he forgot, it's that it's being rebranded as something to be proud of. And often that storytelling comes out in rap lyrics. I told y'all we was gonna come back to all these boys I said step to the front of the line. So the first one we got is Notorious B.I.G. in his song Respect. She was only 16. She was older than me. I was only 13. But she gave me a pussy. Let's be clear about something. I know 3 years is 3 years is 3 years, but 3 years is not 3 years is not 3 years when we're talking about 13 and 16. 3 years is not 3 years when we're talking about 14 and 17. 3 years is not 3 years when we're talking about 15 and 18. 3 years is 3 years when we talk about 40 and 43, 30 and 33, maybe 20 and 23, 70 and 73. But 16 and 13? No, this isn't just a lyric. It's a lesson. A generation of boys were taught to call harm manhood. And a lot of women are participating in this shit. Yes, a 16-year-old also don't have a frontal lobe. That's a whole conversation. I don't hold a 16-year-old to the way I would hold a 18 and a 20-year-old. But 13 and 16? Whew. We got Tyler the Creator with his song Pigs. Fucked my babysitter, and I never told my mom. This highlights how silence is part of the system of rape culture. Full stop. Rape culture does not survive unless they're silent. That line's casual delivery tells us everything. Because this kind of harm clearly don't register to Tyler the Creator as harm. You don't fuck your babysitter. You were sexually assaulted by your babysitter. Because it's likely that your babysitter was a woman who was probably 3+ years older than you. As somebody who babysitting was my first job, I'm thinking about the kids I used to babysit. 3 kids, 3 siblings, Martinique and Martez. And I'm thinking, I'm definitely, they grown now. I mean, they over 30 now. But I'm thinking back, and y'all was really looking at kids that young, that disparate in age from y'all, want to fuck them? I'm thinking about how they just was kids, babies, and I was a kid. Then we got Bizarre of D12 and his song Revelation. My babysitter said I have a big dick and I was only 6. Lock her up, even if it's in juvie. I know I bypassed the systems lens with that, and I really am an abolitionist. You told a 6-year-old they have a big dick? That is exploitation. I know that Bizarre tried to deliver that like humor, like reinforcing a lie that boys can't be violated if they're aroused or admired, which we gonna get to, but that's exploitation. That's exploitation. Then we got Kevin Gates, and Kevin used to be one of my little crushes. Kevin used to be, he is no longer. He was on a Vlad TV interview and he said, my babysitter used to play with me when I was little. I liked it. Now we gonna get into how desire and physiology does not equal consent. But just because a child doesn't understand it as harm doesn't make it any less harm. Desire doesn't equal consent, especially when desire is shaped by adults. Rarely is the babysitter the same age as the child being babysat. It's rare because that's probably illegal. So we got a power dynamic, we got an age dynamic in women typically who are babysitting younger boy children. And I understand that my brain does, I always say, I'm glad I'm just queer. And I'm glad I just like adults. Because the brain of somebody who looks at a child and becomes sexually aroused needs to be studied. Because if we don't study it, we can't address it. Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge it. Because this shit has been normalized, and that's a whole problem. But if we don't study this shit, like how they go into prisons and study serial killers, because they have all the time in the world, we gotta study people who are attracted to people younger than them, who are pedophiles. Let's call it what it is. Then we got Lil Wayne, honey. Multiple interviews. I was 11. I got some head. She was grown. I felt like a man. Weezy, you wouldn't have felt like a man if you didn't live in a world that told you that being a man equals fucking older women. Again, when you subsume the symptoms of sexual harm inside of the definition of manhood, you are gonna miss survivors of sexual assault who are male every time. But that's the conditioning, because being abused made him feel like a man, not a violated child. A man. And let's look at Weezy. Let's look at Lil Wayne today. Physically, let's look at Lil Wayne. I'm being very surface on this. Let's look at Lil Wayne's look, aesthetics. He looked like what he been through. But the people in his circle don't say shit because they eating off him. But Lil Weezy looked like what he been through. All the poverty, all the sexual assault, all the violence, all the drugs. But the drugs are a response to all the trauma and all the wounds that he trying to escape. Y'all could say that song that he made Scissor sound cute, but Scissor is drugs. Promethazine and maybe phenobarb, I don't know what it is. But Wayne looks like the harm that he's been through. Wayne looks like a rape boy. Some of these boys have managed to not look like what they've been through. But Wayne looks like I was 11, I got some head, she was grown and I felt like a man. You look like that, Wayne. You look like the conditioning, being abused. You look like it made you feel like a man. You look like a violated child. Then we got y'all favorite, Kanye West. Kanye came out the gate swinging. Kanye came out with College Dropout. Kanye had a mama that was like an academic. Kanye was from black ass Chicago. Kanye gave us something we had never seen. We thought Kanye was gonna like rise to the top and be an icon for different reasons. But on his song, We Don't Care, he says at the tender age of 6, she liked to give head. Now, I don't know if he means he was 6 or she was 6. I'm gonna go with the fact that he was 6. And whether fact or fiction, this line reflects a normalized pattern. Children sexualized early turn into punchlines or proof of sexual prowess. And look at Kanye now. See, I know we tend to not be system thinkers a lot. We tend to look at the slice of the pie that's in front of our faces. But the people we see today are a sum total of all of their experiences. And we like to pinpoint it on one thing. Oh, Kanye just fucked up because his mama died. No, that was the tipping point for Kanye. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. But the straw that broke the camel's back, that straw is not the only straw. That's the straw that broke the camel's back, meaning there were other straws on the camel's back. And the other straws were at the tender age of 6, she liked to give head. The other straws were sexualized early as a child. Donda West's death was a straw that broke Kanye's back. But please believe Kanye had a shit ton of straws already on his back. And some of them straws was early exposure to sex as a child, being sexually violated as a child, normalizing sexual violation as a child, living in a culture that says because it's normalized, who you gonna talk to? Because the people around you probably gonna be like, what the fuck is your problem? When we see people in front of our faces, we are looking at the sum total of who the fuck they are, for good and for bad. And we can, for our own comfort, pinpoint it to one thing that we want it to be. Oh, that man mama died. That's because black culture says you only get to break when your mama died, as a man especially. But that ain't the only thing that be wrong with these men out here. We just only let them cry at their mama funeral. But it's a whole bunch of other straws on a whole bunch of backs of a whole bunch of black men other than the fact that their mama fucking died. Their mama dying is what broke them. That's the straw that broke their back. But again, if you have a straw that breaks the camel's back, that means there's a shit ton of other straws already on the camel's back. And stop riding camels when y'all travel, by the way. And this one, save the best for last. It's not a lyric per se, but Boosie badass from the great state of Louisiana, the beautiful city of Baton Rouge. For starters, Boosie got 9 children, 9 kids. Somebody just said, what you trying to say? A black man from the hood who admits in his lyrics that he sell drugs, he gotta be a rape boy? If it walk like a duck and it quack like a fucking duck. And I know correlation don't equal causation, but having 9 kids with 7 different women, using your lyrics to glorify drug use, calling women everything but their name, that might fall under the 7 ways to spot a rape boy. That might fall under the 7 ways. Promiscuity framed as pride. You ain't gotta find probably one Boosie song to find promiscuity framed as pride. Hyper performance of masculinity. Meanwhile, Boosie ain't the most masculine thing walking, if I may be inappropriate. So what, never mind. Because Boosie likes to come for people. And I do not need a Baton Rouge, New Orleans beef. But I am gonna say this. Boosie did not stop there. Boosie also claims that he had grown women perform oral sex on his underage sons and nephews. So now we also have from our list of ways to spot a raped boy is an inability to set sexual boundaries, detachment from emotional intimacy, and over-sexualization of youth that is celebrated instead of questioned. Baby, if that 7-point list on how to spot a raped boy was designed to gather an ACE score, Boosie would have a good 6 or 7. Boosie would have a good 6 or 7. And by the way, an ACE score is an adverse childhood experiences score. It's like a tally of different types of abuse, neglect, childhood dysfunction, and it goes from 0 to 10. But what's mind-boggling is that these male rappers' art absolutely imitates their life. It's blatant in their lyrics. It reminds me of when I'm leading workshops and I say that Caucasian and white are not interchangeable terms. And somebody in the audience says, what? And I say, yes. Where are Caucasian people from? And often people don't know. And I say it's in the word Caucasian, Asian. By the way, the term Caucasian originally referred to the people who lived in and around the Caucasus Mountain region in Eurasia. So Eurasia is located between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and that's straddling the boundaries between Europe and Asia. However, because we like to co-opt a term and misappropriately use it, now it's basically used to describe anybody of European descent from anywhere in Europe, including people in Europe, North America, Australia. But the most notable Caucasians, literal Caucasians who are from the Caucasus are the Kardashians. Yep. And none of us would look at Kim Kardashian and Robert Jr. and maybe even Khloe, because, you know, child, they say her daddy and their daddy ain't the same dad. But none of us would look at the Kardashians and be like, they're Anglo-white. We see that the Kardashians got a little spice to their phenotype. And that's because Robert Kardashian Sr. is of Armenian descent. Yes, Robert Kardashian Sr., the one who got OJ off. He is of Armenian descent, and Armenia is in the Caucasus region, the mountain region I referred earlier to, in Eurasia. So they are Caucasian, Asia in the word. But similarly, how Caucasian is in the word. Same with Biggie at 13, same with Wayne at 11, babysitters, older girls. Their trauma is in their words. But it's not told as trauma, it's told as triumph. Not protected, but praised. And the world claps. And the world says, damn, Wayne looked horrible. But what really happened is that he was exposed too early, violated, and handed a lie that says that makes you a man. And we call it culture. This is harmed dressed in rap lyrics and a good beat. These are not symptoms of being advanced. They are spiritual splinters of harm that we rename as power. So yes, boys need more and better mental health care and diagnoses. But before we can diagnose them, we need to recognize them. So that might means we need to detach what we call manhood from symptoms of a raped boy. Not with shame, but with truth. Not to punish them, but to protect them. Because until we can spot them, we will keep applauding their pain and watching them wither away and do random shit like Kanye keeps fucking doing. And then we tell boys these lies about harm, like a misnamed survival script. So I've come up with 7 lies that we tell boys, like these messages get planted early. If somebody wants you, especially somebody older, that means you're powerful. And that becomes the lie you survive by. A lie that shapes your entire identity called manhood. The first lie, being chosen equals being strong. Even if you're too young to understand it. Even if you're too young to understand what's happening, if somebody older wants you, that's supposed to mean you're powerful. A fun fact, being picked does not mean being protected. And it definitely doesn't mean being ready. And the second lie we tell boys, because it feels good, means you consented to it. In other words, we conflate pleasure with consent. According to Washington University's Relationship and Sexual Violence Prevention Center's male survivor rape myth, sexual arousal, including climax, erection, or ejaculation during a sexual assault, means the survivor wanted it or consented to the sexual contract. That is false. Fact. Sexual arousal, including climax, erection, and ejaculation, are physiological responses that may result from mere physical contact or extreme stress. And the last thing I checked, Often, when people are being sexually assaulted, they are stressed. And I'm going to go as far as to say that although these men get on these microphones and rap about how they felt like a man during these encounters, them motherfuckers was stressed when it was happening. Stressed. So yes, their little penis got hard because physiologically, it was responding to stress. I would argue that many of them didn't initially experience pleasure. Sure, it may have come, but they were stressed. Just because a body reacts does not mean the heart agrees. There is a difference between curiosity and comprehension. Young people are curious about a whole bunch of shit that they don't understand. And bodily reaction is not the same as readiness or desire. Then another lie we tell them is anger and promiscuity are just how boys are. We normalize anger and promiscuity. We do not recognize the trauma of boys because we normalized its symptoms. We call it testosterone. We call it swag. We call it just being a boy. We mistake symptoms of trauma for personality, but sometimes what we're looking at is pain with no place to go. And that is the definition of grief. So let's reserve that for the death of a loved one, not for our first time experiencing sex. Then another lie might be the most insidious one on this list. If it came from a woman, it wasn't harm. If it came from a woman, it wasn't abuse. Fun fact, women can be and often are sexual predators. And it's often because they know they're protected by rape culture. Rape culture eroticizes harm when the perpetrator does not fit the stereotype. And rape culture eroticizes their story. We call those men lucky. You bagged a baddie. How you bagged old Miss Parker? Miss Parker, Miss Parker. Rape culture doesn't say that Miss Parker ass outside watering them plants in the short ass shorts on Friday was abuse. We was normalizing the fuck out of trauma and harm in films in the 90s. Rape culture says you pulled a baddie. Miss Parker, Miss Parker. And in doing so, we erase the wound while it's still open. I want us to imagine if Ice Cube or Chris Tucker, as teenagers in Friday, had some kind of way been lured into Miss Parker's house, and Miss Parker, someone who was their parents' age, had sex with them, how confused they would have been. And then because we live in communal proximity, meaning near each other, they had nowhere to go after that confusing experience. And Miss Parker ass was probably gonna come back outside watering more plants to confuse them even more. And who the fuck they was gonna talk to about it? Because they was told that it should be damn. Because we're told that if a woman does it, it's not harm. He should want it. Then we got if you praised for it, it couldn't have hurt. This immediately makes applause become a muzzle. It shuts you up. But here's the thing we don't talk enough about when it comes to muzzles. Muzzles do not silence. Muzzles just makes the dog bark quieter or muffled depending on a muzzle. Muzzles are designed to prevent biting and scavenging, not to silence a dog. Praise doesn't silence boys, it quiets and muffles their pain. Praise prevents them from acknowledging the actual harm, but the energy is still there. It just comes out in an inability to emotionally connect. It comes out as only being able to express aggressive emotions, save when they become a father or an uncle or something where they have to hold a tender baby that brings out their little softness. It comes out as fucking on women, but reserving connection, who they desire to impress, who they value, who they respect, who they revere, who they actually desire to share true time and intimacy with, yeah, that's reserved for their homeboy. You can't grieve something that the world says made you a man. But inside, the boy still knows what it felt like. Then we got surviving is the same as being okay, as another lie we tell little boys or boys. Just because he's functioning does not mean he's free. A lot of boys grow up holding silence as proof of strength. But survival without language is not healing. It's just a performance. Survival is not strength if silence is the cost. Power is not truth if it demands your performance. And a lot of raped boys are out here surviving and thinking that's the same thing as them being okay. Meanwhile, they have insane drug habits. And I don't knock drug use in specific areas, but the level of drugs people use to silence the pain of being a raped boy or girl is egregious. And the last one, real men don't talk about what happened. Now, I said earlier that if it came from a woman, it wasn't harm, was one of the most insidious ones on this list. I believe that real men don't talk about what happened is the loudest lie on this list. Isolates them from their voice. I meet so many men who actually are separated from their voice. They loud, they're aggressive, they can run a list of all of the tenets of manhood, but they don't have their voice. It isolates them from their softness, from their ability to choose who they become next. A lot of men, because of patriarchy, which is responsible for rape culture, are actually disembodied from things like their voice, things like their softness, oddly from things like desire. A lot of men don't actually know who they are, who they want to be, let alone who they want to become next. It makes them almost walk around with the subconscious belief that to speak is to risk being seen as weak. just to speak. I don't know about the white boys. I don't know about the Asian boys. I don't know about the other boys. We start seeing little boys at around 13, 14 going from smiling and giggling, smiling in pictures, to mean mugging in pictures, to standing like, what happened to your smile? You began to survive and you became silent. Black culture says men don't talk a lot. Why he talk so fucking much? He must be gay. That man might want to say something. We put a limit on how much men can talk. And if a man supersedes that arbitrary limit that's set by each individual, but collectively, we have a limit. Surviving being the same as being okay, so that now all of a sudden men go silent. And we reward silence and denigrate men that talk too much. And then assign that to sexuality. Oh, he a little sissy. You talk too much for a man. We want every man to be a man of few words. And that be embedded inside of manhood. And that few words is reflected of a real man. And that a man who talks too much is distancing himself from manhood and get closer to womanhood or queerness. We gotta heal, beloved. Those are all part of the unwritten rules of manhood, and some of that is rooted in rape culture. That disembodying yourself, that severing yourself from yourself, have you walking around like a zombie inside your own body with the subconscious belief that if you speak, that is a risk of being weak. So men often become voluntary muzzles. And we talked about what muzzles do. You can still hear the dog barking with a muzzle on. It's just silenced and suppressed. Because remember what Danielle Sered reminded us of at the very beginning, the quote I told y'all we are carrying through this whole video. No one enters violence for the first time by committing it. So before you label somebody dangerous, you have to ask yourself, where were they first made to feel unsafe? Chris Brown is not the first or the last boy who will be exposed too early then praised for it. But we also can't ignore what came after Chris Brown's exposure. Chris has a long and documented history of physical violence, especially against women. Very much so giving violence against the group of people that first harmed me. From the infamous domestic violence incident with Rihanna, to his later arrest for assault, to repeated outbursts of aggression in public and private spaces. Can we not see that Chris Brown is a raped boy? This is not about excusing it. This is about examining the origin of it. Because when we normalize harm against boys, we risk creating men who normalize harm against others. So back to our video centering. No one enters violence for the first time by committing it. So we have to ask, what was done to Chris Brown before he became the one doing the harm? I, for one, don't think, I'm about to go off topic a little bit to something that's fiction, but I don't for once think that Precious's mama was entering violence for the first time by committing such heinous acts to Precious in that movie. Not for 1 minute. Dare I say we could look at her and see her demons was dancing and have been dancing partners for decades. The insidious nature of that sexual assault should tell us everything that we need to know. Baby, Monique, girl, you acted your ass off in that damn film. But back to real life. Back to Chris Brown, back to a nation of rape boys. What feeds what? And what, because this question of what feeds what goes deeper than any one person. Sometimes praise feeds suppression. So you get celebrated for what harmed you and you stop feeling allowed to say it hurts. Then sometimes charisma feeds invisibility. You learn to perform charm or confidence so nobody asks you what you survived. Now, I'm not a male survivor of sexual assault, but I am charismatic and I am charming. And I assure you, no one asks people like us what we survive. Having a class clown and a comedian from young is one of the easiest ways to disappear, to get people off your back. And then sometimes silence feeds self-blame. If nobody told you it was harm, you start being like, well, maybe I asked for it. And then sometimes violation feeds validation. So being chosen becomes your proof of worth, even when you didn't have a choice. I have heard people say, and it is heartbreaking to hear, that their rape initially indicated to them that they were desired. And the girls who were not raped, they probably weren't raped because they were ugly. Violation feeding validation. Way too understood. Then sometimes survival feeds rigidity. You learn to control everything because softness once got you hurt. So you control everything. And then we have unacknowledged harm feeds replicated harm. So when a wound don't have nowhere to go, it turns into something else. Remember what Danielle Sered said. No one enters violence for the first time by committing it. I would say 99.9% of survivors, I would say that 99.9% of predators are also survivors. And sometimes misrecognition feeds misdirection. Like you can't see your own pain, so you stop believing other people's pain. I really think that this somehow connects to the people who was like, I paid back my student loans, why should they have theirs forgiven? Now, I ain't saying all those people were survivors of sexual assault, but I do know how systems work. And I know how ideologies of systems float around and are absorbed in fucked up ways. So again, what feeds what? What parts of you had to harden just to keep functioning? What masks got you through a world that never saw the boy, only the performance? What applause taught you to never grieve? This is not just about Chris Brown. Just like I said in my other video, this is not just about Just Hilarious. This is about a system that harms and then hides. A world that doesn't interrupt the lie that says you should be grateful for what violated you. You should be grateful that that grown-ass, fine-ass woman gave you the time of day. You should be grateful. So what am I doing here in this video? Me? What I'm doing here is that this is a cultural autopsy. I'm not here to go viral. I'm here to tell the truth inside the silence. If you are someone who is holding truth like that, a message that doesn't fit inside of a soundbite, that is exactly what I built the Voice Vault for. Not every truth needs a platform, but every truth needs protection. And this is what I do to help my Voice Vault clients protect the power in their voice before the world distorts it. Because remember, abuse robs us of voice often. So if something in this stirred you, if you're carrying something that's hard for you to hold alone, you do not need to be louder, you need to be vaulted. I'm not here to entertain, I'm here to build strategy for people who speak when it matters. And if that's you, Vault is open. Check the video description. There's a link to my Voice Vault alignment form. Complete that form and you will hear from me personally within 72 hours. Your voice doesn't need to be everywhere, just anchored. And when you are ready, I'm around. The Voice Vault. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Chris Brown, a nation of raped boys, raped girls, blackness, the Voice Vault. So drop it in the comments. Make sure you share and subscribe. And remember, I'm the Ignant intellectual, the bridge between the hood and the ivory tower. Black brilliance, formal education, not required. You ain't gotta agree with me, but at least know why you think what you think.